Chapter 22. Farewell to Love and Friendship. Because of his intensive travel schedule into Eastern Europe during those busy months, Ari had lost touch with Nicole. Then one evening in mid-December, she called and asked to meet him the next day at their favorite restaurant on Boulevard du Port-Royal. Of course he had agreed, trying not to sound too eager. At least she had initiated the get-together. Was this a good omen? Ari arrived first and took an inside table beyond the bar in a secluded corner. He had been waiting only a few minutes when Nicole came up quietly behind him and kissed him lightly on the cheek. Her long, silken blonde hair caressed his neck, and the fresh scrubbed scent of her presence overwhelmed him with tender memories. With a swish of her full silk skirt, she sat down beside him, more radiantly beautiful than ever. She was 7 months pregnant and looked it. Obviously, he had lost the abortion battle and resented that. Just seeing her again, however, brought back the old magic feeling, the same giddy attraction he'd felt the first time he'd laid eyes on her that unforgettable day nearly 7 years ago. Ari felt his heart suddenly racing as old passions were inflamed again. "I miss you," he blurted out. It wasn't at all the opening he had so carefully rehearsed. He felt flustered just being with her, like he'd felt on their first date. It was almost as though their relationship were starting all over again. How he wished it could. "I miss you too, Ari," she responded quickly. "Very much." "Then what are we doing apart, eating our hearts out?" "I feel the same way," she said earnestly, "and that's why I wanted us to get together, to talk." "Well, you've had your way," began Ari, "so I guess it's too late to talk about that." Not knowing where to go from there, he paused and waited. "I worry about you, Ari." That remark surprised him and put him on guard. "Worry about me?" "You work so hard, day and night, and I don't think you take very good care of yourself without me." "I eat, I sleep. That can't be what you're concerned about." "Of course I am, but there's more. I'm concerned that you're putting your energy into something that won't work." "Won't work? I guess you haven't heard the news lately. You're kidding, of course." She tossed her hair back and leaned forward, elbows on the table, chin resting on clasped hands, and looked at him intently. "I know the wall came down and communism's collapsing, at least in Eastern Europe, but those are superficial symptoms. The disease rages on untouched." "You surprise me, Nikki. You've never expressed these sentiments before," replied Ari warily, beginning to have a bad feeling about their getting together. "Is this another result of your new way of thinking?" She nodded almost imperceptibly and pressed on. "You mean well, Ari. You've devoted your entire life to creating a new world order of peace and plenty for everyone. I admire you for that passion. But it's doomed to fail, in spite of what seems like such astonishing success at this moment. Isn't that rather dogmatic and sweeping?" asked Ari, puzzled. "We've talked very little about this in the past. Of course, I didn't want my work to intrude into our private lives." "Oh, I'm not concerned with the details of how you're going about it, especially now. I just know that you can't possibly achieve your heart's desire. That's what troubles me, and that's why I wanted to talk about it. You're going to be disillusioned one of these days. And you asked me to meet you so you could tell me that?" "Just listen to me, Ari, please. It's not easy for me to articulate. I'm so new at this. But, well, you're not going to solve the world's problems by cleaning up the environment or changing the social and political systems. The root of the problem lies much deeper than that. We're all sinners. People have to be changed on the inside, and only God can do that." The waiter had been hovering nearby, ready to take their orders, but Ari waved him away. "So you're saying that the problem is not with society and political systems, but with people? I think it's both. And please, if you want to call yourself a sinner, go ahead. But don't include me in that clan of evil, okay? I don't have anything to be ashamed of in my life. I can hold my head high. God knows I've expended myself for what I thought was right." "Ari, I'm not taking anything away from your sincere efforts. They're admirable, as I already said. But to put it in medical terms, your diagnosis has been wrong. You haven't recognized the real malady that plagues this planet. All of us, you and me and everybody else, are rebels trying to play God in different ways. Until we let the one and only true God direct our lives, there'll never be real peace on this earth. Look, Nicole, interrupted Ari in an agitated tone. If you want to believe those childish tales, go ahead, but I've already told you I won't communicate on that level. I know, and that only proves what I'm saying. I felt just like you do until 5 months ago. The last thing I wanted was for God to run his world, or my life. Our efforts at creating a peaceful world are attempts to prove that we don't need him. Precisely. I don't need an imaginary deity telling me what to do. I've gotten along okay without that crutch. Ari's voice was getting louder, and other patrons were stealing curious glances at this pair that was obviously having a lover's quarrel. And I resent being brought here to have your religion forced on me. Calm down, Ari, said Nicole softly. We're attracting attention. I'm sorry if I come across like I'm preaching at you. It's just that I want so much for you to have the same peace I've found, a peace and joy inside like I never thought was possible. You've achieved your peace by destroying mine, he flung back bitterly, then hurried on. That proves nothing. Any placebo would have the same effect if you really believed in it. No, Ari, I'm relying upon irrefutable facts and impeccable logic, and it rings true to my conscience as well. To what I know inside of me is truly right. Nikki, you're wasting your time. We could be talking about something really significant, something we can find common ground on. Oh, Ari, she exclaimed passionately, face the facts. Here you are, expending yourself to convince students that something's wrong with the world and enlisting them to make it right. Yet at the same time, you deny an infallible standard of right and wrong. So why should anyone go with your definition of what's wrong in society and how to make it right? It's common sense. Everybody recognizes tyranny and injustice and... True, cut in Nicole, and where did this universal standard of right and wrong come from? Not from the configurations of atoms in the brain. You just admitted what the Bible says, that God has written his moral laws in every person's conscience. The Bible? Come on, you don't believe those fables. You've never read the Bible, much less studied it. Now, what would you think of someone who condemned a book without ever reading a word of it or knowing anything about it except by hearsay? I know enough about it. Ari, have you ever read any of it? There was a long silence. As a matter of fact, no, he conceded at last. Your conscience would have bothered you if you'd lied to me, right? And your conscience also tells you that you haven't lived a perfect life any more than I have. We've broken God's moral laws. Like living together without being married, he retorted contemptuously. Is that what you're trying to convince me of? Well, I won't buy it. I'm not going to let you lay a guilt trip on me just because it makes you feel good to call yourself a sinner. I wasn't even thinking of that, Ari, honestly. We're sinners in lots of ways, and you can't pay for breaking God's laws in the past by keeping them perfectly in the future. That's why God became a man through the virgin birth, why Jesus Christ died for our sins, so we could be forgiven. Ari, what's the matter? Jesus Christ! With barely controlled anger, Ari spat out the words. You're going too far. Do me a favor. Don't mention that name again. Nicole opened her mouth to reply, then thought better of it. She regarded Ari for a few moments in silent anguish, then stood to her feet and walked slowly out of the restaurant. He made no attempt to follow her. Ari had hoped that the remarkable progression of events in Eastern Europe would have convinced Abdul that nonviolence had now proved to be eminently effective, yet so far it seemed not to have swayed him at all. Something had to be done to persuade him. The Middle East was one place where Ari still had the green light from Roger's group, and he remained convinced that Abdul was the ideal man to head up the work there, if only he could be returned to reason. Several weeks after their last futile meeting in the restaurant, Ari swallowed his pride and called Nicole to enlist her help in one final attempt to bring Abdul to his senses. Because of Abdul's long friendship with her, Ari was hopeful that Nicole could get him to at least listen to reason. Perhaps together they could rescue him from the whirlpool of hatred and violence that they both suspected had caught him in its vortex and was sucking him down to destruction. Nicole was able to persuade Abdi to meet them both a few days before Christmas 1989 at his choice of location. The arrangement was made on the condition that each of them would take a separate circuitous route to get there and make certain that no one was following. The demand sounded like paranoia, but they were willing to meet his terms in order to see Abdul face to face once again. So it was that the three formerly close friends, now seemingly worlds apart, met one last time on a busy platform of the Paris metro. Nikki was due to give birth in a few weeks. She looked extremely tired, and Ari's heart went out to her. He felt overwhelmed by the impulse to hold her in his arms and speak some comforting words, but their alienation was now so complete that no hope of reconciliation remained. The three of them found an empty bench at the end of the platform and sat down together. "Fantastic what's been happening in Eastern Europe," was Ari's opening comment after they had engaged in small talk for a few minutes. "Communism is being overturned, dictatorships thrown out in exchange for democracy, and all by nonviolent means." "I'm happy for you, Ari," responded Nicole. "This should be very gratifying after all those years of hard work." "There are 60 million Muslims in the Soviet Union still being treated like second-class citizens," was Abdul's disheartening response. "That's going to change," Ari assured him. "Everything can't happen overnight. But what about the suppression of basic civil rights in Muslim countries? That's where I'd hoped you'd be involved. You could play such a key role in a historic transformation." He didn't want to be drawn into an argument, but Abdi's challenge couldn't go unanswered. And how else could he be persuaded? "That's Western propaganda." Abdul's retort was by now predictable, almost programmed. "There is no suppression of human rights in Arab lands." "Just answer me honestly, Abdi," insisted Ari. "Has the situation improved or worsened in Lebanon since the Muslims gained control?" Abdul's face darkened. "You keep forgetting that the whole cause of the problems there is Israel." "Suppression of human rights inside Arab countries is the fault of Israel?" asked Nicole incredulously. Abdi stared away in silence. "I should not be talking with you," he said at last. "It's only because we've been friends for so long, but we can't meet again." "You can't be serious, Abdi," pleaded Nicole. "After all the years we've been like brother and sister to each other, I can't believe it." "I love you, Nikki, but I'm a Palestinian, and I have to do my part to liberate my people." "And so you've joined the PLO, is that true?" demanded Ari. Abdul made no reply. "The PLO charter calls for the total destruction of Israel," said Ari evenly, trying unsuccessfully to make eye contact with Abdul. "How can you now contemplate the extermination of Israelis? That's not the solution." For one uneasy moment, Nicole's thoughts went back to a more personal problem. "Extermination, darling? Wasn't extermination your solution, too?" She bit her lip to keep from saying it. "We don't advocate killing all Jews," insisted Abdi. "Yasser Arafat is not a Hitler." "I just reminded you," interrupted Ari pointedly, "the PLO charter calls for the destruction of Israel." "That's right. The problem is the state of Israel. It's illegally occupying Arab land and it has no right to exist. All we want is our land back and a Palestinian state with its capital in Jerusalem. Some Jews can continue to live there after all Arab lands have been restored." "And you're committed to accomplish this by terrorism against innocent civilians?" demanded Ari. "Civilian casualties are inevitable in any war." "Abdi, I've never been a supporter of Israel, but the more you justify this fanatical position, the more my sympathies begin to shift in that direction. They stole that land." "I beg your pardon. Palestine was partitioned by the United Nations. But I'm not even talking about that. Let me ask you a more basic question. Would you rather be an Arab living in Israel or a Jew living in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, or even Jordan or Saudi Arabia?" Abdul stood angrily to his feet. "It isn't so simple," he protested. "There are complex issues rooted in the past. The way you phrase your question betrays your prejudice and ignorance of history and your tolerance of injustice." Ari stood also and put an affectionate hand momentarily on Abdul's shoulder. "I thought I knew you," he said sadly. "I thought we had the same ideals. And I know we did, until you came under the influence of Arafat and his gang of thugs." Lightly but affectionately, Abdul kissed Nicole on both cheeks. "I will miss you very much, and I will pray that Allah will bless you both with a good child." He took Ari's outstretched hand. "I don't want to part as your enemy. We have been like brothers for too long. Someday you'll understand." Spontaneously, they fell into one another's arms. Then Abdul tore himself free, turned, and walked resolutely toward the platform exit.